So, welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller here with my co host, Kevin David Kridner. And before we dive in, we always recap our three guiding principles, which is first of all, you don't need to be fixed, you need to be known. And we believe that love is defined as knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity, not to win arguments, but to understand. And third, we don't come here with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally and just follow where authenticity leads us. So pull up a chair, grab a drink. Let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. And so, Kevin, what's on your mind this morning?
Yeah. I think the better question is what's not.
Let's
Oh man.
which thread do I pull here?
Right, right. Yeah. I first thing, so I've had a dog for a little over a year now. And I'm a runner, so my hope was the dream was at some point like I would go on runs with my dog. But he's a puppy and he as dogs do, like we go for a walk, like he wants to smell everything and he can be really obstinate. And if he's like wanting to smell something and I want to keep going, he'll just like lay down. So I've avoided going on runs with him because the worry was like he would just lay down and I'd have to drag him the entire run. So yesterday I decided to risk it. I'm like, I'm just gonna try it. And he did amazing. He just followed along with me, didn't go in front, wasn't behind, just right by my side for like 2, 3 miles. And like it was a successful run, which I did not expect to happen.
Not to put read too much into it, but it's a pretty good analogy of life. Some some people's problem is just they don't have enough to do and they're not moving fast enough.
Right? Yeah. Oh man, it's so good. I'm texting all my friends like, cause they always ask me, cause I told them from the beginning, like when I got him, I was like, I'm gonna take him for runs, and they're like, have you gone on runs with him yet? Have you gone on runs with him yet? And I'm always like, no, I don't think he's ready. Da, da, da. So I'm texting him, oh, we did the first one today. There's like a mini celebration across the United States.
Everybody's popping
I
champagne, being like, "Yay,
Yeah, Clive did it. He did
Clive did
it.
it!" That is awesome.
It's so good.
I love it.
That made my day yesterday.
That's awesome.
Oh man. What I was thinking of, we've talked about this before, but I was thinking of that whole concept of the armchair Sherpa.
Yep.
And it's such a fascinating concept to me, and certain circumstances within life have kind of led to revisiting that. And since you coined the term, at least in this space, like what do you mean by that term?
Well, I mean, it's well, let's start with the very simple answer. The very simple answer is there are a lot of people who have a lot of opinions that about the way the world should be, who are sitting in their chair. Well, I mean, the story, let's actually back up a little bit with context. The context for this term came through from the idea of going down through the valley of the shadow of death, coming down off the mountaintop and walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And there are two kinds of people. The people who sit at the top of the mountain and are like, well, here's how you navigate, here's how you should navigate the valley. But then there's also people who've walked through the valley who have a vastly different experience. And social media is just one example. I think most of technology just amplifies human nature. Social media, AI, anything like that. Um, Even consumerism, capitalism, all that stuff. And so I think one of the things that's happened because of that is that people who have really no right to have an opinion. I mean, they have a right to have an opinion, but it's not an informed opinion, can share their opinion. Um,
Yeah.
and and like where this becomes challenging is when it's a close friend of yours or somebody you like, you think like on a personal level, and maybe you trust them in some spheres of life, maybe some spheres of life, they have gone down the valley, but it's so easy to share opinions. And then if you want to take this all the way to the extreme, it's like I'm actually working on an article right now. And one of the points in the business space and talking, one of the points I'm talking about is the behind the scenes of the kind of the celebrity business culture, where it's like if you have a crowd, if you have a best-selling book, if you have a Lamborghini, if you fly private jet, if you fill in the blank, it must mean that you have the answer. And I mean, sometimes it does. Like let's not be, let's not fool ourselves to believe that people don't come upon that legitimately in many cases. But let's also not fool ourselves that I've got good friends who've seen behind the curtain, worked in those places, and they're people who present fantastic public images, and nobody knows that they're just teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, and they're telling everybody, "Here's how to get rich." And the reason it
Right.
works is because one of the easiest ways to get rich is to tell other people how to get rich. And I mean, so
To
uh,
actually produce nothing.
and actually produce nothing. And the problem is that the people who actually do know how, and I've got good friends who've gone deep down this lane, is that it really isn't that the real ways to make money. It isn't that interesting. It's not that flashy. It doesn't really feed the ego all that much. It's really quite, I don't know, almost
Mundane.
just, yeah, kind of disappointing actually. So that's my
Yeah.
armchair Sherpa explanation.
Yeah. Yeah. But I've read a lot of books about it, or I've seen this, and this is the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard this guy. I've heard this guy, and this guy obviously is successful, and so therefore I'm gonna. I mean, I think across all of life, it's easy to take thinking shortcuts, and I do it.
We all
Admittedly,
do.
like let's just recite a platitude because it seems like it fits in this situation, and and on a cursory
People would
analysis,
never do that with scripture, would they?
never. I- who would do that?
Yeah,
What an absurd thought, Kevin. I
it's
certainly wouldn't
ridiculous.
either. Um,
Oh man. God won't give you more than you can handle.
mic drop. Um,
I remember at my dad's funeral, a few years back, 3, 4 years back now, during during COVID, so maybe almost 5 years. It was very limited space because of COVID and all that kind of stuff. So very limited people could be there and that kind of thing. And I remember afterwards, people coming up to me and citing these empty platitudes, like, "Oh, he's in a better place now," like all the things. And we're at a funeral, and it's my dad's funeral, so I'm not going to get into the conversation right then and there. So I just, well, thank you, appreciate it. Like, or like God has a plan for this, that kind of thing. And I was like, I remember thinking in my head, this is not God's plan. This was never God's intention. I mean, my dad suffered from cancer for 15 years. Got a bone marrow transplant, then had to go through all the treatments, the steroids, and everything that went along with the bone marrow transplant. And what actually ended up killing him was the treatments for the bone marrow transplant. Just sustained use of steroids over such a long period of time, and his bowel actually ruptured, and like that was it. And they tried to go in and repair it, and they couldn't because the skin was just too brittle, and all that, everything that goes along with that. All that to say, like, I was like, this isn't God's plan. How could this
yeah,
be God's plan? And like, this sounds like our plan. This sounds like our world, and our we've created this utopia of how things should be. And like at that point, I was just like, just stand next to me, just give me a hug, just tell me you're with me. That's all that's necessary. But we have these empty platitudes, and it's like, come on.
Yes. I think my favorite, thinking back to my dad's funeral, some of my favorite things were just the extremely warm-hearted hugs with no words. Like it's just like, I'm here.
Yeah.
I love you. I see you. I care about you. And then also just these random memories and aspects of my dad that I never got to see because, well, these people are multifaceted. And this one guy
Yeah.
talked about him teaching. My dad taught high school like a small engines class. This guy talked to me about what an impact it made on him having my dad as a teacher, and I'm just like, but it's striking. I was watching an interview about somebody who negotiated a deal with Apple, got bought by Apple, and he was not he was an Apple transplant. I should know the guy's name. I don't even. It's kind of that's kind of embarrassing, but um, and all the other executives wanted the deal to happen so badly that they all prepped him on how to be interviewed by Steve Jobs. And one of Steve Jobs' questions was, "So, how's your relationship with your dad?" And the point of that question was to see how long somebody could withstand in silence without breaking the silence. Because if you're in a negotiation, high stakes negotiation, running your mouth is really a sure way to lose.
It's bad.
It's bad. Um, and I've also seen this taught as a sales technique, rightly or wrongly. It's like we as humans have a really hard time with empty spaces.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I remember I was sitting years ago, a long time ago, sitting with a client, and she was going through. She was like older in life, not older, but she was in her mid 30s and was going back to school and getting her education. She was in her psychology 101 class, and at a certain point, we're sitting there and she's not talking, you know, and for spiritual direction or counseling, there. He said just sit and wait. And in that space, I've learned to be very, very comfortable with silence. Just let it be. And at some point, I don't know how long into it, she goes, I know what you're doing. I go, what am I doing? And she goes, you're being silent so that I'll fill the space. And I'm like, she's like, that's a traditional therapist tool. I'm like, well, A, I'm not a therapist and never claimed to be, and that's not what I'm doing here. I actually just want to know you, and this is your space. You get to fill the space. So, like, this isn't, some manipulative tactic. This is simply just your space. But it was so funny. Like, she was so uncomfortable with the silence that she actually called the silence out. This is a tactic. I know what you're doing. Okay. All
yeah.
right.
Well, yeah. So I want to go back into the God doesn't give you anything more than you can handle because you can't make a statement like that and just move on. I mean, implicit in your statement, and this is kind of implicit in your statement is the idea that God does give you more than you can handle, but He will not abandon you with more than you can. He will pick up what you can't handle. Is that the frame of thinking, or like what is the frame of thinking behind that statement?
I think that the frame of thinking behind that statement is I am so utterly scared living in this world that I need God to not give me more than I can handle.
Yeah,
And experience, and I'm just owning this as my experience, God is consistently giving me way more than I can handle
right.
so that I stop relying on myself and I start trusting Him. It's fascinating. Didn't see it going this way, but I've been researching and writing an article on the concept of pharmakia in scripture. And when you hear like when I hear pharmakia, or when I've heard it talked about, especially within more charismatic circles, it's specifically related to some sort of substance, some sort of potion. The pictures of a cauldron, potions, witch, all that kind of stuff. But in scripture, it's translated as sorcery or witchcraft. And as I go deeper and deeper into it, it really is simplified into the person that is so afraid they have taken hold of the reins and they are going to make things happen because they don't trust that God will.
Yeah.
And so, in that sense, like that statement is born out of pharmakia. Like
Yeah.
I just have to, I have to believe that he would never give me anything that I can't handle.
Right.
And so it's an attempt to control the situation and the circumstances. And like if I've learned anything, it's like you cannot control the situations or circumstances in this world. I have control over one thing and one thing only, and that's, excuse me, that's my responses to the circumstances I find myself in.
Right.
And as Paul says, like the response is either trust and obedience or manipulation and control.
Yeah.
Those are the two choices I have. And I'm not saying that everybody who makes that decision does it consciously. I think most often, except for the fringe elements which are gone deep into sorcery and witchcraft, um, most people do it subconsciously out of their ego, just out of self-protection, you know?
One of the things that's really struck me lately is that there's so many different languages for this. I have to think of, I think Watchman Nee talks about the breaking of the outer man. There's all talking lots of different ways to talk about the same thing, but the more self-reliant you are, the heavier of a load it takes to break the self-reliance.
Hmm.
And I think the downside of being determined, driven, capable, intelligent, all the traits that we label as, you know, hardworking, diligent, all the traits that we label as good in our Western culture is that it can very easily build into layer upon layer upon layer of self-reliance. And then we wonder why. I mean, I wondered this. It's like you can problem solve your way through every situation, and you get to finally, by the grace of God, you find yourself in front of a situation that you cannot manipulate and control or fix your way out of.
Right.
And that, for me, I can think of a. I mean, there's a particular moment for me when that really started to happen, and it started the great unraveling of the self-reliance.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
didn't happen
Brene
overnight
Brown.
either.
Yeah. Brene Brown talks about coming to that moment you're talking about, and she calls it her breakdown slash enlightenment.
Yes.
You just hit the wall, and then it's like everything that I potentially could do, have thought to do, I'm tapped out. I'm done. It's over. And that's the moment that's the we've talked about this before. That's the glass shattering moment. I've come to the end of myself. I cannot think of anything else to do. What do I do at that point? Because all of us are, hopefully, by the grace of God, are going to have that moment.
Yeah.
And yet it seems like a very narrow path that very few in that moment choose the surrender, the humbling, and the vast majority seek a way out of it, manipulate a way out of it. And that's sorcery, that's witchcraft by the very definition of the term.
Well, there's so many threads to this. It's like, well, okay, I mean, we read in Hebrews about Jesus enduring pain for the joy that was set before him. And if you apply this to this context, everybody's like, I want enlightenment. Uh, no, you don't. I mean, yeah, you do, but are you sure?
Do you?
It comes at a price. The unraveling.
Yeah. I remember hearing this song, and I forget, maybe by Maverick City. It's like I want to be tried by fire, purified, that kind of thing. And I remember listening to that, thinking like, no, you don't. Nobody does. Nobody wants to be burned at the stake, metaphorically, physically. Nobody wants that. But it's the grace of God that it happens because we all need it. And there's certain things that keep you from that. Jesus seems to be very clear about one thing that keeps us from that refining: wealth.
Mm.
It's harder for a rich man to get into heaven, that whole thing, because like if you can pay your way out of it, if you've got the resources to avoid the issue, you're probably going to.
It's really interesting. I've heard people advise to, I mean, one of the ways to flesh problems out in businesses is just remove cash, and it'll tell you very quickly where the problems are.
Right.
Um,
Well, same thing personally, right?
well, same thing personally, for real. Go
You
on a
want to see
spending.
where the leaks are? Get in a situation where you don't have any money. It's going to present itself really quickly.
It will. And I think, but isn't this also part of the like? I mean, you think of people who are constantly on the bleeding edge, and I mean, I'm just uh, there's a lot of things about his life I wouldn't want to emulate, but he's a very intriguing individual. But Elon Musk regularly talks about going up to the. You think how many times he's been on the brink of bankruptcy, and
Mhm.
you saved by the bell, like just pulling a rabbit out of a hat somehow. Who knows how.
Mhm.
But it seems like the options that we have. I think it ends up being a conscious choice to. Um, I mean, this really ties into our last conversation with Patrick and Caitlin, but it comes to a conscious choice to put ourselves at risk, to to allow ourselves. It's very easy to take wealth and build security around yourself and become reliant on it. But one of the ways to mitigate against that is to constantly be putting yourself, I mean, it's faith, I guess, taking risk, putting yourself on the
Right.
edge.
And you can put your faith in a few different things. Probably two. You can put your faith in God, or you can put your faith in yourself.
Yeah.
Remember hearing Jeff Bezos talk one time, and he talked about kind of the same process you're talking about, the brink of bankruptcy, that all that kind of stuff. And he said, and we referenced this last time, but he said, like, I've lived here for so long, this is just my norm, and so I'm used to it. He's become the desert. But which desert? The desert of self-reliance or the desert of surrender to God? There's deserts both ways. And me, it was like, wow, okay. It's not just one way. There's not just one desert. There is the desert you go out to that, so God can you strip everything down, bring you to that place of surrender, and then you become one with that. And then there's the desert of self-reliance. Strip everything down. I can only rely on me. I've got to hustle. This is, if it's going to happen, it's up to me. There's that too. And so people like Elon Musk and Jobs and these icons, um, they've had their desert, but it's been a desert of self-reliance.
So I want to tease this apart a little bit because I think I think one of the places where I've struggled with the spirituality and ambition, I've struggled in the area of spirituality and ambition, like because I've heard many people say, like there's many people who will kind of say there should be less activity, not more. Like or somewhere I got instilled with the idea that true spirituality is sitting, sitting somewhere on top of the mountain in complete silence for, 12 hours every day.
Very, very Buddha-esque.
Very Buddha-esque,
Under the lotus tree.
under the lotus tree. And even within, Christian kind of spirituality, for whatever reason, that kind of was, we have a lot of different terms for it. Um, Even the type of activity, ministry activity, running an organization that is has a tax, depending on the organization's tax structure, defines how well you're spending your time. I mean, that's perhaps oversimplified, but it's, you know, um, so
Not far off.
it's not far off. But somewhere in this space, and I think this may be where this concept of union has to come in. It's like there is this isn't a matter of going into the desert is not the desert with God is not a lotus tree experience. It is an experience of walking into it is walking together with him. Man, like how, how would you describe do you get what I'm getting after? And how would you describe how would you clarify?
Well, if you look at Buddhist teachings, path, which is essentially the path you're to walk, and it's based on the essential that all suffering is caused by desire, and so you rid yourself of desire, and you almost become an automaton at that point. I feel like you lose your humanity because you have desires, God-given desires. I think the Buddhist path is an avoidance of the idea that desires have choices associated with them. Will I allow God to fulfill this desire, or am I going to fulfill this desire? And their path is take away desire. You have desires, which is, as Thomas Merton said, it's shadow operating on shadow. And there's no joy in that relationship because there's no joy in things that aren't real,
Right.
you know? And so I'm pretending like I don't have desires or convince myself I don't have desires, and then I become an automaton. Where the path with Jesus, in my opinion, is no, you have desires, and I gave you these desires, and these are good things. I just want you to use them in union with me versus under your own power. And that's what I would say the difference is. And so allowing him to refine the desires. Like, I don't know if I told you this, but last week I'm running, and that's where all my best thoughts come. Either I'm running or I'm in the shower.
That's awesome.
So, and all sorts of thoughts and feelings and emotions are coming up, which they typically do when I run. And I noticed that my path before was a very Buddhist path, was to pretend like they're not there, push them away, argue with them, all that kind of stuff. And I felt like the Holy Spirit said with in the midst of this time, why can't you just rest in my name in this place? Okay. What does that mean? Tell me how. Tell me more. I'd like to hear it. The sales pitch was right there and it sucked me in, or the hook was there. And he said, what if you allowed me to purify the desire, the thought, the feeling, the emotion? Okay. Like, I understand what you're saying, but what does that mean? And so I saw this picture, and it's like I was in a and the river is polluted. It's silty, it's got pollution in it, all that kind of stuff. And I have a coffee filter in my hand, and I'm trying to purify the river with this coffee filter in my hand. And then I go, okay, I see that. That's me trying to purify all these things on my own. And I go, what's the ideal? And then I saw this filter that spanned the entirety of the river. And then me standing on the other side and looking down and seeing what was coming through the filter was pure water. Okay, tell me about this. He's like, well, the impurities are your thoughts and feelings mixed with your desires and your desires to do this on your own and all that kind of stuff. He goes, and the filter is me. Jesus is that filter. And I allow those thoughts and feelings to flow through, and what is pure about them comes side. What is impure stays on this side. And it just made so much sense to me that I'd never conceived of that. Maybe that's spiritually immature of me, or part of the process that he has me in, or whatever the case may be. But I had never even considered it because I'd been so self-involved. So I have to take care of this. But can I allow myself to have those desires and run him and see what is pure on the other side of it? That's what it looks like to me. And I don't know if you can do that in the busyness of life. There almost has to be some silence, some solitude. Be still and know that I am God in that framework. And maybe it looks different for each person. The amount of time. Maybe it's not 12 hours a day meditating on the mountaintop. Maybe it's, you know, 20 minutes periodically throughout the day. Maybe it's an hour set aside. Whatever it looks like. What is the Lord leading you towards and purifying these desires? Because, like Irenaeus said, the joy of God is man fully alive. Like, and how do we get fully alive? Well, to drop the impurities, to recognize we do have desires, and He created us with those. They're not bad. It's just they have to be in union with Him.
Yeah. And I think it helps to break down a little bit. So self-reliance then becomes, I mean, self-reliance can make really successful but really difficult people. Um, but then even putting the name Christian on what you do doesn't mean that you're doing it in union with him. There's many things that get done out of some kind of ambition with a desire to please God, with a desire to do the right thing, with a desire to, change the world in whatever capacity, but it's not done with union, and so the desires don't get purified. I think it's a really good picture. I think for me, the way that I've made sense of it, and I probably first really noticed myself doing this in probably my early to mid 20s, but was intentionally in inviting Jesus into the middle of my situation, my thoughts, my desires, and increasingly then, um, on a practical level, one of the things that was really helpful for me was I have a friend of mine who facilitates. He does parts work, internal family systems, those types of things, and it gave me and then he came to Christ and started integrating like Christ into this, and it gave me a model, I suppose, maybe imperfect, I don't know, but it gave me a model for how do I take what's going on inside of me and be with Christ with that, with him, with that, and just lay it out. And it's really striking to me how being present in that moment with him and with all my stuff, whatever it is, it's this surrender, and he somehow rearranges, purifies, pulls out the truth. It's just I don't know how to describe it. It's very simple. It's just
Well,
simply
it's the
being there.
mystery,
It's the
right?
mystery.
Right. Like, for any of us to sit here and say, I trust God, you have to acknowledge that there's a mystery that is happening, that things are going to didn't see coming, you don't want to happen, all those things. And can you still trust him in the midst of the mystery? To me, that's the true alchemy. I think alchemy was the sorcery of trying to manipulate God to do what it is you wanted him to do instead of just in the mystery. God, I don't understand this. This makes zero sense. I trust you. I can't see forward, but my glass is shattered. I'm at the end of my rope, and all I have left is to trust you. And it's amazing how people get there. But it's amazing also after that realization, when things do start to turn around, how quickly we can go back
Yep.
to the alchemy.
Which, again, becoming comfortable with the places of not knowing, um, putting our home in that place. It's a very, the use of the word alchemy is a very interesting use of the word. Um,
Well, it's a very spiritual concept that's been adulterated. Turning lead into gold was the alchemist's dream, right? But is that a reality, a physical reality that people tried? Certainly, but it's more of a spiritual reality. I'm going to take this thing that is mundane and I'm going to turn it into something bright, shiny, and beautiful.
right.
Right. So my life is this mundane thing and I want to turn it into something amazing.
Well, like, let's dive into that a little bit. But if and so from one perspective, it's like, well, let's kill the desire for a beautiful life. Let's just become okay with boring. And you can see people. I remember reading. This is not an indictment of the person. It's just it's by virtue of their visibility. But this individual who's very successful and talks openly about just embracing the mundane, the boring, the but
Hmm.
there's a light that's disappeared from their eyes, and people have commented about it. And I think there's a question: do you suppress that desire for a beautiful life, or again, like just again making this super practical, um, embracing union with Christ with that desire, and so sitting with Christ in the reality of this quite boring and mundane life and this desire for a more beautiful, grandiose
Right.
life, and allowing and then allowing in the presence with him, allowing him uh, to work with that what he will, and he
Right.
will. I, I gotta say
I think
this.
you're I think you're, yeah, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just one little note on my hyperlogical brain says, by definition, if there is no mystery, then you're God.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, no, that's it exactly. If you can think of something better, greater, more powerful, whatever, than God, then that thing has become God. And that's what an idol is, right? And that's the reality of it. Like, to me, I'm fascinated with words. I always have been. I love the meaning of words, and not only the objective meaning of a word, but what do you mean when you say word?
Yeah.
Like this fabulous life that you envision, that you have to have. You may even feel called to. And I'm not going to get in the position of who called you and whose call is it, and we can talk about that at some point, but is to manipulate your definition of this wonderful life. When you actually get it, is it as wonderful as you thought it was?
Right.
And so if you go to Jesus looking for him to confirm your suspicions, you're going to be really disappointed. That's not submission. And how many of our prayers look like, God, I just want thing will be better. Will you give me this?
Mhm.
And when he does, then I'm very upset because it doesn't look like it should have looked like. That's a
Yeah.
that's a self motive. Like
By the way, I don't.
like speed.
Your
God,
audio is dropping in and out. I'm not sure exactly.
is it?
It
Oh
might be.
no.
I don't know if it's your headset or something. It's mostly coming through, but there's some dropped words. Like it almost sounds like noise canceling or something, but I don't know.
It probably is. Is it better now?
I think so.
Okay, when I have my fan on,
Oh.
it may be picking up too. So it let me know if it continues.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No, 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 it's okay. Like I just feel like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I know this is what will make me happy, and so I'm going to put everything into this. I know what will make me happy. And I've been in the position, and I've couched it in spiritual language. This is what God has called me to do. This is what I hear him saying, all that kind of stuff. And I was wrong because when I got that thing, it wasn't what I wanted to be or thought it could be. I think at the end of the day, what he wants more than anything else is to know us.
Yeah.
And in that space of knowing and being known by God, as Paul talks about, as the definition of love, it looks vastly different than we imagined what it would look like. And that is the life. But that requires surrender and submission. It's what it requires. So, can I lay all of my idols down and say, I just want you? Can I get to that place? My desire, my true desire, and I think all of our true desires is for a home, and He is our home, and every pure desire flows from that place. Like James says, you pray and you want and you ask and you don't get because you ask with the wrong motives. But if you were asking with the right motive, then you would get anything you asked for. And I think the right motive is I want to be with you. Bottom line, end of story, whatever it looks like.
Well, and it's funny how easily, just a little side note, it's funny how easily we take that verse and we're like, okay, so how do I get the right motives so that I can get what I want? Like it, I mean, not that I've ever done that ever.
No,
No.
no, no,
I
no.
mean, but like, but
This is
like
for
this whole,
everybody listening.
yeah, for all
Clear for everybody listening. Like this is the path.
for all for all you poor schleps out there who are still whatever. Good gracious. All right. Sarcasm aside, like
Right.
but the thing that as I've started walking down this journey, Kevin, I think one of the things that's been baffling to me is I think for a long time, well, I know for a long time, the voice of God was really a high ideal in my life. And as I've moved more and more to the perspective that of finding my home in Him, knowing and being known, being with Him, union, all of those things, I, sometimes it honestly feels like I don't hear God anymore. And I don't know what to make of it. It's like it kind of feels like my definition may be shifting of what it looks like to actually hear from him or what that even means, or maybe the priority is shifting. I don't even know what to make of it. But
Yeah. I was in I was in the airport in Fort Lauderdale years ago. Had a layover, delayed flight, all that kind of stuff. So I go to this little restaurant, cafe type place, and I'm sitting down just eating, whittling away my time waiting for my flight. And I look over and I see this older couple. If they were a day old, they had to have been in their 80s. They're sitting across from each other. And I'm over here, so I can kind of see both of them. And I'm just fascinated. The way they looked at each other. Not in the time I, not a word was spoken between them, but the way they looked at each other, they knew each other. And I remember thinking at the time, whether it was the Holy Spirit, whether it was me, whatever the case may be, was that's what the relationship with God is like.
Mm.
When you've gone to this place, when you've gone away from the selfish, when you've gone away from the milk faith of I need to hear his voice and I need to have him direct every one of my steps and that kind of thing, into I know him and I'm sitting across the table from him and he knows me and not a word needs to be spoken because we know each
Mm.
other. And to me, that was such a beautiful understanding of what this union looks like. And some moments I have it, some moments I don't.
Yeah.
But that to me was like, they've probably been married at that point for 60 years.
Yeah.
They've lived through everything together and they're still here and they're not fighting and they're not arguing and they just know each other and they're sitting across from each other. This isn't about sex. It isn't about money. It isn't about any of these things. It's simply about knowing and being known.
Yeah.
And that's stuck with me ever since then. Ever since that experience, it just has stuck with me. And so, yeah, I think in the midst of it, like in the midst of this sanctification, as the Catholics would call it, discipleship, learning, growing, developing this narrow path, I think the further and further you get, the simpler it gets. And Teresa of Avila that made that made that statement. She's like the deeper you go into God, the simpler and simpler your life becomes.
Yeah.
To me, that's the goal. No castles to build. There's no empires to grow. There's no enemies to conquer. It's simply just union with Him. To me, that's the ideal life. That's the life that I'm walking towards and working towards. Some days I do it well. Some days I do it horribly.
Yeah. I find it really, I'm reflecting here on the silence. I think for myself, part of the need to have God speaking was, I mean, it really, some of it at least, and I don't know the full of it, but it came from a need to, it really came from a lack of trust that he had the capacity to get my attention, redeem my mistakes. Like just this incredible fear of the future. Like I have to, it's like a test where it's a multiple choice question and B is the only right answer. So you better choose B. And part of this, if you understand that his heart and his goal is knowing and being known, and that he truly does have the capacity to direct hearts that are open and surrendered to him and can redeem situations, then suddenly there's an incredible weight that can come off of like, I have to make sure I nail this thing.
Right.
Um, which, which even from a human psychological perspective, one of the ways to guarantee that you don't hit peak performance is to put an incredible amount of pressure on yourself to hit peak performance.
Right. Right. Yeah. One of my buddies, he's been walking this, grew up very, very religious and very in that space of God said, God said, God said, and he would always wrestle back and forth with it. And he says God's done something very curious over the last year. Because one of his common questions would be sit in prayer, and he's a silence guy, like days in silence and that kind of thing. Um, he took a trip. He decided like quit his job. I'm just gonna drive around the country, go to places that I want to visit, maybe see friends, that kind of thing. So lots of solitude, lots of silence, all that kind of stuff. But he says within the last year, God's been doing something very curious with him. He will sit down and ask God, what do you want me to do? Or what should I do? And he believes, and I have a tendency to believe him, that God asked the question back. And the question is, what do you want to do? And he heard that. He's like, no, that's got to be the enemy. And he kept praying, kept praying, kept praying. And what he heard was over and over again, what do you want to do? And he made this statement. He goes, it's as if God wants to partner with me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And even certain things where he'd be like, well, I should do this, but I want to do this. God would be like, what do you want to do? And he would say, like, God would say these things to him, like, well, you could do that. There's nothing actively wrong with that thing, or you could do this thing. Which one do you want to choose?
Right.
One draws you closer to me. The other is more about you, or maybe not even that black and white. But what is it that you choose?
Well, and I think one of the things you and I have had this conversation. There's way too much but the only way to know what you want sometimes is often actually most times is to do a whole bunch of what you don't want to do. Um,
Right, right.
and uh,
Human nature.
human nature. And if you're a thinker, then you'll run scenarios in your head and come to foregone conclusions about what you will or won't enjoy. I had a very interesting conversation with one of my custom GPTs that knows a whole lot about me, and I asked it the question, what is one of the blind spots that I have that I'm probably unaware of? And the answer it came back with was that you're so good at was basically that you're so good at running scenarios that and so good at coming up with ideas that you don't always gauge it against reality. Like, what did I actually do? Did I actually try that thing? I'm like, for a large learning model, that's actually a really good insight.
Pretty insightful.
Pretty insightful. Um, so
I saw this guy
good.
on Substack that he is running this program, and it's all around utilizing AI as a brainstorming tool and a spiritual guide, if you will. And he's very clear to say this is not God, this is not the voice of God, but it's putting these vulnerable thoughts that you never say to anybody into this model and being brutally honest and then asking for feedback.
Yeah.
And I've read through some of his stuff and I'm like, okay, I could see that working. Okay, you know. But in reality, like a friend of mine, one of my closest friends, we were having a conversation last week or the week before, and he was talking about Moses going up the mountain, Mount Sinai, for the to get the Ten Commandments, and how he comes down and they've created the golden calf, and he goes back up, and there's this conversation around God's like, I'm just gonna destroy him. Like it's over. I'm just gonna destroy him. And then Moses begs, like, no, you dude, he brought them out of here, like they're in the desert, like this is, all that he Moses goes through his scenarios. And my friend made this interesting point. This is not theology. This is not saying this is biblical truth, but it was a question he was wondering about, and it's fascinating to me as well. He's like, what if God made that statement to see what Moses's response would be?
Mm,
What if he wanted to see where his heart was? If his heart was for these people to lead these people, and would he stand up for them? I thought that was a really interesting point.
well, because we look at so much that's so fascinating. Again, looking at the concept of sin and judgment and and doing the right thing and like like extrapolating from what you just said, what if God's heart in drawing us, directing us, guiding us, speaking to us is we in Western Christianity think that it must be about accomplishment. Like there's something for the kingdom, by whatever definition you use for that, that he wants to do and accomplish. God is a goal-oriented God. Um,
Right.
a- and it's a very different frame to say he let's start all the way at the beginning, like the things that we can't control. We are in we were born into the family that we were, in the situation that we were, to show us things about ourselves that we could not possibly have known. Well, I mean, he could certainly have revealed in other places, but to show us things about ourselves. He leads us into, he allows us to wander into wherever we wonder, so that we have the gift of, so that he can see who we are, so that we can see who we are, so that we can see who he is. It's a very different way of thinking. And
Yeah.
and it
Well, it makes
removes,
sense that he uses language like courting language throughout Scripture, marriage and courting language. Like there's
yeah.
something happening here. How do you respond to this? What do you do here? Like there's this depth of knowing and being known that's happening. Like Jesus says, this has always fascinated me. Jesus says, like, I don't want servants. I want friends. Servants don't know the master's business. And I have told you my father's business. So you're not servants. You're
Mhm.
It's a fascinating thing.
Well, and let's define friends. What do friends mean? Kevin, what does a friend mean to you?
Somebody who knows me. Somebody who knows me and I know them. And we walk through life together, whatever comes.
Somebody who celebrates when Clive goes on a run with you.
Right,
That's a true
exactly.
friend.
That's true, friend. And I've had those glass shattering moments, multiple, throughout my life. And one of the things that I saw in those glass shattering moments is there are people that you called friends who run in the midst of that situation. There's people that you call friends that stay and walk through it with you. And this isn't about justifying what you did and saying it was okay. And it's not even part of the equation. It's walking through the pain and the suffering and the correction and the repentance and everything with you.
Yeah.
And so for me, I look at those people in my life who have stayed, who have walked through it with me, who have the guts to call me out on things and stay present, not just drop bombs and walk away.
Mhm.
Those are friends. And that's what Jesus is. Like that's what he promises, right? I will never leave you nor forsake you. I will be with you in every last situation. And it brings me back to the garden, Gethsemane. Hey, can you guys just stay and pray here with me for just a little bit? And they fall asleep. Imagine what he's going through at that time. And they're asleep. And he comes back and wakes them up. Really need you to be present and vigilant with me. Please. Yeah, we're sorry. We're tired. Goes away, comes back there asleep again. And he finally says, the hour has come. He's looking for friends, for people who will walk through that season with you. That's what Jesus does.
I- There's again, so much. Can you imagine a friend who only who always calls you but never answers the phone when you call? Can you imagine a friend who's always trying to put on the perfect front so that you will always do, you know, do the things that he wants, that takes you everywhere, takes you to all the important places so that people think more highly of themselves.
Yeah.
Um, but then taking a step further, the implication of this is that is it true that we don't truly understand the gospel until we understand friendship?
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I think if you want to go back, I mean, you and I have talked about the loneliness epidemic. One of the tragedies of that, I mean, I experienced a lot of, I don't know if I would have known what to call it as a kid, but I experienced a lot of loneliness as a kid. I struggled through much of my life to make friends, um, partially because I had what felt very, it's what felt to me like very unusual and odd interests, and that definitely contributed to it. Um, but in a lonely culture, in a culture that's built on achievement, on a culture that's built on manipulating your way, not always, um, but where certain forms of manipulation are accepted, um, it does two things. One, that there's definitely an absence and a cry for the gospel,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it seems to me like it also creates some difficulty to really understand the gospel and what it is.
Right.
It's maybe one of the reasons why certain types of why achievement-based, goal-based Christianity has sold so well because it is a frame of Christianity that fits very well into the way we live our lives. It's very American,
It's very transactional.
very transactional.
And if you move from that transaction mindset to a union mindset, then it's going to cause a lot of problems because you're moving away in which, positives are accounted for, negatives are accounted for, and then at the end of the day, if you're positive, then you're good. If you're negative, you're not. And then you start to say, this is about union. This is
Mhm.
about knowing being known. This is about perichoresis. You're gonna cause a lot of problems. Because what's the objective standard? What's the objective standard I measure somebody's worth by? Right now, it's the ledger in most cases.
Well, or in many cases, what's the satisfaction or what's the program success? What's the satisfaction of, you know, what's attendance growth? What's satisfaction of attendees? There's any number of ways that we can establish KPIs. Now, it's also interesting though that metrics and KPIs and performance indicators are all very useful gauges to say how well are we actually doing towards what we're saying we're doing. But the challenge comes when we impose value on people based on that, and also when we sacrifice people's humanity for that. Like, is there not a world, or am I just diluting it to say that there's a world in which, okay, here's how I would look at it, and I'm curious for your feedback on this, is like we talk about union. Union to me is living with a whole lot more gray and a whole lot less black and white, but is and a whole lot more integration. So what does it look like to integrate relationship and caring for people? And what happens when that informs performance indicators and when performance indicators inform that? if those two had a relationship, what would emerge out of that relationship? Now, I don't know. What are you, or is that completely diluting the essence of what we're after?
The first thought that comes to mind is like, have I earned it? Have I earned it? I, s- I sat with Dad's funeral came up on multiple occasions during this conversation.
Yeah.
Sat with my brother, my dad's funeral. He's the oldest and very accomplished. He's a doctor and been very successful in pretty much everything he's put his hands to. Um, and at the end of the funeral, he looked at me and he said, I just hope he was proud of me. And to me, that was like, wow. Um, and it's a very salient question, right?
Hmm.
Because I could look at him and I could say, look at all you've accomplished. You're highly successful. You have a family and a loving family and all that. You look at everything that you've accomplished, and yet still he's asking the question or he's making the observation. I hope he was proud of me. What I hear there is, did I earn it?
Yes. Do I deserve it? Am I worthy?
Right. And it made me sad because he's been my brother my whole life.
Hmm.
And I see who he is, and I love him for who he is, not for what he's accomplished.
Yeah.
And yet he has those thoughts. And I think we all have those thoughts. Did I earn it? Am I worthy? You know? And I think the gospel is you're worthy.
Yeah.
You're worthy. I understand. I understand what it's like to live in this world. I understand how you make bad decisions. I understand all these things. I know you. And I'm saying you're worthy. So worthy that I sent my son to illustrate that point for you. For him to walk around talking about union and oneness and love and grace and mercy and the kingdom and he died for it. Like you're worthy.
Yeah.
So I how can I look at another, which I have done in my life? How can I look at another and say, no, you're not worthy?
Yeah.
I can't. Like I
Right.
remember Bill saying in a sermon once, um, I can't speak negatively about somebody else because that is a child of God who I am commenting on. And I am in direct opposition. I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm in direct opposition to what the Word of God says about that person when I go after them. That really hit me. It really hit me. I can't do it. No, I have the thought, of course, as we all do. When there's pain involved and there's betrayal and there's suffering and there's sin and there's these things, the thought's there.
Yeah. The problem with judgment is that Jesus teaches us that judgment implies a standard. And the moment that you become create a standard, you become subject to it. Um, I think going back to where we were talking earlier in the conversation, I think when you are we've talked previously about some of the mental hurdles, the imposter syndrome, the even the self uh, like sometimes shame of putting yourself out there in the world, of taking risk, moving forward. I think tying all of these pieces together and the questions of am I worthy, tying all these pieces together, it's an invitation to to explore union with Christ in the middle of this question, am I worthy?
Brennan Manning, in his book Abba's Child, makes this statement, and I'd heard it hundreds of times before, but for some reason it really impacted me. He said, if you have to define yourself as the beloved of God, you are the beloved of God. If you define yourself as anything other than that, you're distancing yourself from Him and you're causing yourself all sorts of pain from that disconnection. It comes from a lack of union, a lack of acknowledgement that we are the beloved of God. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to strive. You don't have to any of those kind of things. You automatically are the beloved of God. So it's less about fixing and it's more about remembering. Remember who you are. Know yourself. Know Him. Know each other. Like that's what this whole thing is about.
Well, when you take proving out of the equation, I have to think of a conversation I had with a friend of mine yesterday. And he made this comment. He's like, I always want to do things to the best of my ability and I want to do it better. And if I don't do well, then I want to figure out why. And if I just straight up, if it's just not meant for me, well, then I want to go find some other place where I can fit in. And I think the place of being the beloved gives you the ability to look at the metrics and the KPI. Well, when you look at the metrics and the KPIs and you don't measure up, you've got a number of different responses. You can become apathetic, be like, I don't care. And so I'm going to wait in an employment situation. I'm going to wait until the boss fires me, whatever.
Mm,
Make him deal with it. I can make money until then. You can double down and prove your worth. Be like, no, I'm better than this. I can do it. And we've seen no experience lived many stories like that. Or you can say, but from this place of the beloved and from this place of knowing and being known, you can get curious about obviously, this is a reflection of reality, of some version of reality. There's something being reflected back to me. Obviously, you can get curious. There's all kinds of reasons why we fail at something. It doesn't necessarily mean that sometimes it's just, there's all kinds of reasons. But
yeah.
coming from the perspective of the beloved, you don't have to question whether you yourself are broken. And you can start asking questions. Am I in the wrong environment? Am I in the wrong role? Am I missing some skills? Am I missing some knowledge? Are there some tools that I could gain? Have I just not been here long enough in this lane? Have I been here too long? Have I and you can't have very good, honest conversations if you're not with yourself, with others about these things, if you're not settled that you are not fundamentally broken. And if you can have those conversations even believing you're fundamentally broken, but you'll always twist the answers that you get into a way to fix yourself, if that's your
Right.
belief.
Right. One, there's an author who wrote this line, and I forget his or her name, but he says, "Until we come to grips with our own psychic frailty, we're not getting any closer to God." Like just the reality that I am neurotic, I am scared, I'm jealous, that I am narcissistic. Like until grips with my own frailty, how fragile I actually am. The fact that my moods can change minute to minute. I could be like on the top of the world, everything's great. And then sometimes without any sort of cause whatsoever, be in the valley the next moment. And I'm
Yes.
horrible, like that our own frailty. And to come to grips with that and be honest about it. Like all of us.
I had a very interesting conversation this past week. And I think most of my inspiration comes from conversations, but with a gentleman who's in business, and we stumbled on this topic of, and the first layer is, wouldn't it be easier if people were logical? And and then he seriously asked me the question. He's like, well, why not? And I'm like, well, like most things, right or wrong, I might be wrong, but I have an opinion. And I said, my opinion is that most of the decisions that we make actually really don't have that much of a logical answer. Like, do you want vanilla or chocolate ice cream, or do you want ice cream with sprinkles? Like, okay, do the math on that one. Like, that's
Yeah.
like you can't. And I think emotions are God's gift to us to navigate a world with lots of unknowns where you literally can't get enough data to make many decisions. You extrapolate the best you can. I love using logic where I can. I love chasing patterns and trends and all that stuff. But most of the things in our world, like you said, we can't, the only thing we can control is our responses to things going on around us. And so when you have that much unpredictability, can you imagine the torment of living only in a logical world or in a logical mind in the current world in the world that we live in, the weather, the just basic things.
Right. No. Well, it strikes me as you were saying that like that was the Pharisee
You're
ultra logical.
you're breaking
But
up again just a little bit.
I'm cutting out again?
I don't know what's going on.
I don't know. Here,
All
let me
right.
take these off.
Okay.
How about now?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's that Pharisee mindset, right? So ultra logical according to these rules. But in reality, what you're seeing is this is your sense of these rules.
Right.
When we say it doesn't make sense, we're kind of exposing ourselves. Because what is your sense based on? Is it based on an objective standard? Or is it based on your experiences and what you've extrapolated from those experiences? And depending on what you've extrapolated, it creates your logic.
If you want to take an extremely reductionist view, which I'm not encouraging, but it's a helpful analogy, you essentially have, you know, 8 billion large language learning models that are walking around, with their own experience that they're accessing in order to navigate the world.
Right.
Because there's no, again, who is God anyway? Like, by definition, there's nobody here who has access to the entire world's knowledge base, or the universe.
It's a beautiful analogy. You've got 8 billion large language models walking around, functioning on their experience. And the reality is your experience is objectively true. This is what has happened. This is what you've experienced. But what you have extrapolated from that is vastly different for each person. So there has to be some sort of objective standard that we apply our extrapolations to. And it seems to me that the objective standard is love, is knowing and being known, is trust, is vulnerability, is faith, is grace, is mercy, is kindness, like kindness, gentleness, the fruits of the spirit. Like that is the objective standard. But they were mean to me. Okay. But they betrayed me. Okay. This is still the standard. Even if all those things have happened, still the standard.
And I I'm fascinated by these people who say, well, what if AI actually becomes smarter than us and finds out it doesn't need us? And I think you actually have answered this question very beautifully, because I think, again, going back, technology is a mirror for ourselves. If if we have sufficiently demonstrated that love is the supreme measure, it is the standard, the gold standard, then there is no reason for AI to kill us. If, and I'm not suggesting that, I'm not really buying into the apocalyptic whatever the conspiracy theory that goes along with this. But just for the sake of conversation, if where would that thought arise? That thought would arise from a prevailing, highly utilitarian, highly goal-oriented way of thinking. These people consume too many resources. They're not good for the planet. We can manage everything ourselves. I can be self-reliant. I don't need anything else. I ultimately am God. I know what I need to know. And so therefore, the only real acceptable answer in this case is get rid of the humans.
And there are those human beings in our world, and we've all seen them and heard them talk that just want to thin the herd.
Hmm.
Yeah. Whether it's, with the Nazis and the eugenics program and purifying, or like every mode of that has come throughout history, there's always going to be people that see it strictly utilitarian.
Right.
What is the functional value of this human being? And that's a scary thought, because you get to choose what the functional value of a human being is, of another human being. That's a scary thought. And that's what judgment does, essentially, right? The functional value of you to me is zero. Until you start coming around and believing what I believe and acting how I think you should act, you have no value.
I think there's a great deal of pain in the world that comes from people who are trying to navigate, man, who are trying to navigate the world and understand a world that isn't friendly to them. And I think this is such, again, going back to a cry for knowing and being known is like, if you've been given the capacity to see how people can fit into the world around them, then that becomes an incredible gift to those people who are lost, because not everybody can do that. And there's this really, really deep need for us to come together and say, I see you. Let me explore. Let me see how who I am can contribute to who you are so that you can thrive and flourish. And I understand that when you thrive and flourish, I too, well, maybe it's not even me directly. Maybe because we're all connected. My children, my family, the people close to me, my friends, maybe not even through any direct impact, but surely through indirect impact. We will flourish because you're flourishing.
And Jesus says the same thing with the vine and the branches, metaphor. I'm the vine, you're the branches. Attached to me, life flows through you. And that same life that flows through you flows to every other branch that is attached to me. Either directly or indirectly, we're all interconnected.
Yep.
The way God designed the world, even in quantum mechanics, like there's been experiments where we've seen, like, you separate two molecules, across a vast space. One has a force applied to it, the other one feels it.
Yeah.
Like, this is objectively true. We're all connected. And scripture backs that up over and over and over again. And Jesus cries for it.
Yeah.
Father, you and I are one. I'm one with you. You're one with me. I want them to be one with us. Like, he's going towards this interconnectedness of all creation. To deny that is to take an axe to the root of the foundations of the existence that God created. And yet, a loving God says, you get to choose. You get to choose union, or you get to choose self determination. You get to choose. And how much pain caused in him by the choice of self determination.
Mhm.
How much pain? Not in him, in us, the pain in the world seems to me to focus on that paradigm.
But at the same time, look at the impact that a person can have if they only choose to live in union, just to love. And it does not like because we're all connected. And I think again, like going back to deep-seated fears about worthiness. Some of my greatest fears has been around, am I enough? Will I impact enough people in my lifetime? Will I make a big enough change? But if you actually, so much of these fears are answered just by faith in reality. If I just trust that we truly are connected and that love is the gold standard, then it is impossible for me to to pursue union with Christ, to 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 explore that with friends, to know and to be known, to make love the gold standard. It's impossible for me to live like that and not, it's not even a concern. It will happen, and it will happen in whatever context and capacity that I have. That if I want to have maximum impact, whatever that ends up being, let's remove the measurement of how much or how little that is. And let's just live, for lack of a better term, the formula. That sounds so terrible, but like, let's just live by these objective realities that this is how it happens.
And it's the mystery.
It's
And
the
I don't
mystery.
I don't get to control it. I don't get to manipulate how it happens. When I do that, that's how evil comes into the world. And I surrender to the mystery that is God and his thoughts and his way. And that's my job.
I can't think of a better way to end this.
There you go. I
I love it.
love it.
All right. Well, thanks to all of you guys listening in. Apologies for the audio issues, and we'll figure out a way to get all that figured out. Tech, the bane of our existence. But we're super grateful that you made it this far, and we're grateful for you going along with us on our journey. And we will talk to you guys next time. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.